So welcome back to Security and Privacy in Cloud. I'm Jay Lavanya, Assistant Professor of CS Department. So today in this video, we're going to discuss on Unit 5, Monitoring, Auditing, as well as Management. The topic is that abuse of system privileges, events, and alerts. Okay. So what is meant by abuse of system privileges? It refers to the situation where a user, especially one with the elevated access rights, misuses their permission to perform unauthorized or unethical actions. Abuse of system privileges is a serious security concern that can lead to some significant damage within an organization. It also refers to the misuse of elevated access rights granted to users or processes within a computer system or a network. Privilege abuse in cybersecurity refers to the misuse of access rights or privilege granted to users within an organization. So, if you are doing some kind of, you know, privilege or misuse in the sense. So this can involve exploiting these privileges to perform unauthorized actions such as accessing sensitive data, altering system configuration, or executing malicious activity. So the core issue lies in the inappropriate or fraudulent use of these privileges, which can be international or accidental. So, at its instance, privilege abuse occurs when the user leverages their access rights beyond their intended scope. So, this can happen due to some various reasons, including malicious intent, negligence, or ignorance of security policies. So, the consequences of such action can be severe, impacting the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of the critical systems as well as the data. So how does this privilege abuse work in the sense? Privilege abuse typically begins with the attackers identifying and exploiting vulnerabilities within an organization, operating systems, or an application. So they may use brute force attack to crack the password or employ some social engineering tactics to deceive the users into revealing their credential. So once the access is got or gained in the sense, so attackers often deploy some malware to infiltrate systems and elevate their privileges. Okay, and after obtaining the elevated data, attackers might install the backdoors or rootkits to maintain a persistent access to the compromised system. So they can also create new user accounts with some administrative privileges or modify the existing account to escalate their access right. So this allows them to perform some unauthorized actions such as altering system configuration or accessing some sensitive data. Okay, and to maintain the control, or the attackers often exploit some excessive permissions granted to user account and take advantage of unmonitored privileged accounts. So they may also use some shared accounts which lack individual accountability or exploit accounts of ex-employees that were not properly deactivated. So, these methods enable attackers to continue the malicious activities undetected for some extended period. Okay. If you take the example of these privilege abuses, that it can be found across various industries as well as scenarios. Okay. In corporate environments, employees might misuse their access rights to create additional user accounts with some administrative privileges. So this allows them to perform unauthorized actions undetected, such as accessing confidential information or altering system configuration. And another common example is modifying existing user account to grant themselves higher privileges, enabling them to maintain critical system components and data. Okay, and if you take in the financial sector, privilege abuse can lead to some significant financial losses. For instance, a financial company might what it will be doing is that the financial company might monitor the vendor activity to prevent the misuse of the permission that could endanger some sensitive data. Okay. Similarly, if you take in the public sector, government agencies that store some personally identifiable information about citizens must review user activity to ensure the data security and compliance with some regularity requirement. So these examples underscore the pervasive nature of privilege abuse and the importance of vigilant monitoring and management of privileged accounts. Okay. So this is one of the special access to some sensitive parts of a system. Like abuse happens when these rights are used against policy or for personal gain or to harm the system or the others. So these are the examples as we have discussed. So there's a scenario for accessing some confidential files. So admin view the employee payroll or personal files without a valid reason, and deleting the logs or audit trail is done. So description to cover up some malicious actions, and installing unauthorized software which can lead to some security risk or malware, and creating backdoor accounts for later unauthorized access, and copying sensitive data or stealing some intellectual property or some customer data. Okay, and changing the system settings is that weakening the security or causing some instability. Okay, so this is all the examples of the privilege abuse. And apart from these kind of issues, if you are looking for some specific cyber security, like I'm just saying an example, in case of cyber security, there what happens is that this kind of abuse of system privileges is a major, insider threat, and it's one of the hardest to detect and prevent because the malicious actions comes from the authorized users only. Okay, so that is why while keeping the security people inside the company, they will maintain some kind of IAM roles or something like that. Okay, and in the case of cyber security, like there is some concern, like first one, privilege escalation, where the attackers exploit vulnerabilities to gain some higher privileges from the user to admin. Okay, and once it has been escalated, as said, they can access some sensitive systems or data. Okay, and insider threats is that trusted individuals, say for example employees or the contractors, misuse the access for personal gain or some sabotage. Okay, especially dangerous because their activities look like normal to monitoring systems. And lack of least privilege enforcement is that so users often more access than necessary, and increases the attack surface if an account is compromised. Okay, and inadequate logging and monitoring. So without proper audit or trials, it's hard to detect or trace the privilege abuse. Okay, and shadowing, is this warrant official admins but have permissions that allow admin level activities. Okay, so these accounts are often overlooked in some security audits. And mitigation is that so principle of least privilege, that is POLP, which gives the users only the access they need to do their jobs. And privileged access management, that is PAM, the tools that control and monitor the privileged accounts like CyberArk or Beyond Trust. Okay, and regular access review, which periodically check if the user still needs the permission they have. Okay, and multi-factor authentication is that uh, multi-factor authentication we have already discussed. Okay, So there what it will be happening is that it adds an extra layer of security to the privileged account. And SIME solution, we all know already, we have discussed. So like security information or the event management system like Splunk or QRadar helps to detect some abnormal behavior. Okay, I would like to add up a point where there is a real-time example of it, like Snowden case. I hope you might have heard. There is an NSA leak which is occurs in the year 2013. So actually, what happened is that Edward Snowden, it was a contractor working. Okay, he was a contractor working for the National Security Agency. That is the NSA. It is the agency company, something like that. This Edward, what he said is that he has some system administrator level access for this role, which allowed him to view or to manage some highly sensitive system. But what happened is that Edward used his elevated privileges to access some classified documents about the US government surveillance programs. So he bypassed the internal security measures, okay, by using some tools to scrape all the data which is in bulk. Okay, and over time he collected and exfiltrated thousands of documents which was not seen by anyone else. Okay, so he eventually leaked this information to journalists, sparkling global controversy. So, what I want to say is that even though there is some failure, there is like excessive access. He had more access than for necessary for his role, right? He can only able to view, but why no? Why don't we can able to do some audit? How he can able to collect the data? How we can able to exfiltrate the data, right? Insufficient model. So he has done so many thousands of which has been collected, right, in the years, but no one has undetected for months. So that is one thing. And there were enough barriers between the system or the data based on some clearance level. So for each and every level, and that should be some clearance. So once he has gone to this particular folder or something like that, example I'm saying, he has to access from the permission to get from the manager role, or like the person who has the higher authority. So there they have to give the clearance, then only he can able to access them fully. So they don't provide such access. So that is the impact. So massive loss of classified data, or the global backlash and diplomatic strain, increased focus on insider threats across the government as well as the private sectors. Okay, so this is enforce some strict access control and least privilege, and so we have to implement some monitoring, and we have to conduct some insider training and risk assessment in order to avoid such losses in the future. I hope so. Okay, so next topic is that how it's detected. So first one, by basically by means of audit log. Okay, so track who access what, when, and from where. Okay, and SIME tools we have discussed, like Splunk or the QRadar. So here the correlate the behavior and raise the alerts for suspicious activity, and user behavior analytics, that is UEBA, which detects the anomalies like admin suddenly downloading large amount of data, or accessing some systems at unusual hours, and role-based access control. So here it helps to prevent some excessive privilege, and least privilege principle is that users should only have the access they absolutely needed. Okay, so that is how it's detected. How to prevent it? So first step is that we have to limit some admin privileges, followed by we have to use some multi-factor authentication, followed by we have to use some enable some session recording for privileged accounts, and conduct some regular privilege audits, and implement just-in-time access, and you have to train employees on acceptable use policies. Okay. And what are the potential risks of privileged uses? So protecting against some privileged abuse is critical, for maintaining so much of thing, right? So that is the one case where we have to use some key factors in order to find the issue. So here what they have mentioned, first of all, financial loss. So like, there may be so many consequences in an organization. Like financial loss will be there because unauthorized transaction or the theft of sensitive data, which can lead to some substantial financial losses, including costs associated with the remediation and potential fine. Okay. And second one is that a reputation damage. So here the exposure of some confidential information can severely damage a company's reputation, leading to a loss of customer trust and potential business opportunities. And next one is that legal and regulatory consequences. So failure to protect the privileged accounts can result in some legal actions and theft regulatory fines, especially in industries with strict compliance requirements. Okay. Okay, so next one is that disruption of business operations. Okay, so here a privilege abuse can cause significant disruptions, including system downtimes and operational inefficiencies, impacting overall business performance. Okay, and increased vulnerability to further attacks. So once the attackers gain access through some privilege abuse, they can exploit this to launch some additional attacks, compromising more system as well as the data. So this is the potential risk of privilege abuse. Next one we are gonna discuss is about types of privilege abuse. Before that, so there are two types of privilege abuse, that is insider threat as well as external attack. So what are the types of privilege abuse? So first one, insider threat. So this is a common form of abuse where employees or the contractors with legitimate, access misuse their privileges. So this can involve like accessing sensitive data for some personal gain or modifying or deleting some critical system files, installing some unauthorized software. Okay. An external attack is that so cyber criminals may attempt to gain access to privileged account through some techniques like a stolen credential or exploiting some software vulnerabilities or through some social engineering. So once they have privileged access, they can cause some significant damage. Okay. So what are the risks and consequences is that data breaches, so abuse of privileges which can lead to the theft or exposure of some insensitive data, and system damage is that unauthorized modification to system settings can cause instability or outages, and financial loss, which means data breaches and system damage which can result in some significant financial losses. And reputation damage. Security breaches can damage an organization's reputation and erode the customer trust. And legal and regulatory consequences. Failure to protect such a sensitive data, which can result in some legal penalties and regularity fines. And how to prevent is that through the principle of least privilege. So grant the users only the minimum necessary privileges to perform their job functions, or by implementing some strong password like multi-factor authentication and role-based access control, and regular audits like periodically review the user access and system logs to detect the suspicious activity. And security monitoring is that we have to use some security information and event management system to monitor the system activity for some anomalies. And privileged access management, that is PAM, which implements a PAM solution to control and monitor the privileged access. And security awareness steering, where we can educate the employees about the risk of privilege abuse and the importance of security best practices. Okay, so next is that events and alerts. So here The cloud platform generates a huge volume of activities and monitoring and responding to some security relevant events and alert is a key to keeping the cloud environment secure. Okay, so understanding the event and alert is a crucial form for maintaining some integrity or confidentiality and availability of data. So, first of all, what is meant by event? So in cloud security, an event refers to any observable occurrence within a cloud environment. So this can include user logins, file access, configuration changes, and system performance metrics, even which can be benign or malicious, and they serve as the foundational data points for some security monitoring. Okay, and what is meant by alert is that alerts or notification generated based on some specific events that meet some predefined criteria or the threshold, and they are designed to inform the security teams of potential security incident or the anomalies that require immediate attention. Alerts can vary in severity from information notices to critical warnings that indicate a breach or an attack. Okay, so here, if you take the example, okay, as I told, like here they have mentioned some example. So what is the, I mean, importance of events and alerts is that, like IAM activity, if you're going in the sense, it uses some user granted admin privileges, and login activity, you have to log in from a new region, and network configuration changes if you're opening a port 22 SSH to the public, and the data access is 3 bucket file which is downloaded by some unknown user, and resource provisioning, so new VM spun up with some risky configuration. Okay, and what is meant by alert? Yes, like importance of event and alert is that threat detection, instant response, compliance and auditing, and then continuous improvement. Okay, so what is event and like what is that? Event and alerts play a pivotal role in identifying threats, security threats, by monitoring the events in a real time. Organizations can detect some unusual patterns that may indicate some malicious activity. So, what about instant response? So, timely alerts enable security teams to respond quickly to incidents, minimizing the damage and reducing the recovery time. Okay, an effective instant response as it relies on accurate or some actionable alerts and compliance and auditing. So many regulatory framework requires organization to monitor and log the events for some compliance purposes, and alerts helps ensure that organizations are adhering to these regulations by providing a clear audit trail. And continuous improvement is that analyzing the events and alerts which can provide insights into the security posture and vulnerabilities, allowing organizations to improve their security measures over the time. So here a simple cloud security use cases have been given, like S3 bucket misconfiguration in the sense alert if made public, like root account usage is that alert if used at some odd hours, and unusual API activity which alerts are based on some historical behavior, and crypto mine detection alert if EC2 starts using some unusual CPU. Okay, so these are all comes under cloud specific use cases, and enhancing security with alerts. Okay, so here you can see like there will be some continuous improvement in threats, compliance and auditing, as well as the incident response. Okay, so the best practices for managing the events and alerts is that you have to define the clear criteria, which establishes the clear criteria for what constitutes an alert, And this helps in reducing the false positive and ensures that security teams focus on genuine threats. Okay, and prioritize alerts is that not all alerts are created equal. So we have to implement a system to prioritize alerts based on severity and potential impact. So allowing the teams to address the most critical issues first. Okay. And automate responses where possible, automate response to common alert. So this can help in quickly mitigating the threats without requiring manual intervention. And we have to regularly review as well as update. So continuously review and update the event and alert criteria to adapt to some evolving threats and changes in the cloud environment. And integrate with science solutions is that, so here we have to utilize the security information and event management solution to centralize the event logging and alert management, providing a comprehensive view of the security incidents. Okay, so in case of events and alerts, in terms of real case scenario, I'll just show you. Uh, so this is enhancing security with alerts. So what happens is that in case of cloud security, so here in this particular PPT, you could able to see cloud events which uses grant admin privileges, and you have to log in from a new IP address. Okay, and the VM instance will be created and data can be downloaded from the storage. Okay, and similar to that, an event will be matches the suspicious pattern, and cloud security alerts unusual privilege escalation or some successful brute force attack or new VM deployment or some potential data exfiltration. So there will be so many alert types like IAM privilege escalation, unusual login, data exfiltration, public S3 packet detection, okay, malware, disable logging, unencrypted resource creator. You could all seen in a thing, okay, and and similar to that, there are so many real world incidents which occurs uh, in this particular, some cases. So what happened is that here, like, it goes for some capital one data breach. That is one of the event and alert where uh, a former AWS employee, what he done is that exploited some misconfigured web application firewall, that is WEAF, and to access some Capital One's AWS hosted data. So this attacker used some stolen IAM credential to run the commands that listed and downloaded over 100 million customer records. And cloud events involved is that some unusual S3 API activity, like example, get the object or list buckets or use of some EC2 metadata service to retrieve some IAM tokens and large data transfer events and alerting gap, like like alerts were generated but not acted on quickly enough. So take away like cloud trial and real-time alerting and response has to be done. And SSRF and IAM rule misuse detection was essential in a cloud environment. And next incident is that in Tesla Kubernetes breach, so which occurred in the year 2018. So that hackers gained access to some Tesla's Kubernetes admin console, which was not password protected. Okay, see, I don't know why they are not keeping in Tesla, right, in US. I don't know why, but it happened in 2018. There was a survey over it. So inside, they found some credentials that allow access to Tesla's AWS S3 storage. They use this access to mine some cryptocurrency. So that is what we call as a crypto jacking. Okay. So what are the cloud events involved in this crypto jacking, like unauthorized access to some Kubernetes cluster or high CPU usage from mining or inbound connections from unknown IP and alerting cap, like no alerts for public exposure of the admin panel. We have to deploy some detection of unusual resource usage. Okay, and similar to that, in Uber data leak via AWS, what happened is that in Uber, like they Uber engineers accidentally publish AWS credentials in a GitHub repository. Okay, and hackers use the credential to access an S3 bucket containing private rider and driver data of 57 million users. See the thing. Okay, cloud events involves access from an unknown IP or download from a large amount of data from the S3. So there is no alerting system in place of unusual S3 access pattern. So like next is that code spaces in 2014 in which the company shut down. So attackers gained access to code spaces AWS control panel. They demanded ransom when ignored, so they deleted all the customer data backups as well as a snapshot. Like the cloud events, like deletion of EC2 instances or S3 buckets and IAM roles. Okay, and multiple high privilege API calls in quick succession, and no multi-factor authentication and no alerts for destructive actions by unfamiliar IP or the accounts. Okay, so this is about thing, and so how it's unfolded. Okay, right? We'll just check it out. So how it's unfolded, it's that like as I told earlier, like Capital One cloud breach. Okay, so there what happened is that like vulnerability discovery. So attacker identifies some misconfigured web application firewall is involved. Just hosted in AWS that allows command injection via metadata URL, and the alert will be missed. So there will be no alert trigger for abnormal WAF traffic patterns or metadata API access attempts, and credential harvesting second step. So here the attacker uses the WAF to access some AWS EC2 instance metadata and retrieve some temporary IAM credential. So thereby he has to get the role credential, assume the role. Okay. And alert, some systems may have logged this but not prioritized. So it due to some normal appearance of some temporary credential. Third step is that privilege abuse. So here of the stolen credential, the attacker runs the S3 bucket listing commands as well as he'll be list the buckets and list the objects and get the object. The cloud kernel log, what it will be doing is that so sudden spike in S3 access activity, especially across some multiple buckets or some guard duty reactions will be occurred, but alerts weren't triggered urgently. Okay, and data exfiltration. So where the massive download of sensitive data like social security number, the credit score, or the name from multiple S3 buckets, there we can able to get the object from which IP address or from geolocation, all those stuff we can able to derive. And anomaly detection for large data transfer or some unusual geolocation access can be done, and alert raised but not escalated as a critical threat in time. Okay, and external discovery is that the attacker post about the breach on GitHub using their real name itself. Okay, and external researcher is that spots the post and reports it to the Capital One, and internal investigation where it begins. Okay, and there is one service like IAM, so which we have discussed. So there what they will be doing is that is the backbone, and how they can able to access, and all those stuff will be created, and where like
like Google Cloud or in Azure. Okay, all those stuff will be chosen in some platform, and it will be going through some various conditions. Okay, so that is what it will be happening. And if you take the events and the alerts specifically in some Google Cloud platform or the Microsoft Azure cloud environment, like in Google Cloud platform, they'll be having some cloud audit logs and the VPC flow log, cloud DNS log, or the cloud OMR and security command system. So where they'll be having some service owner role and publicly exposed storage bucket and detected via some misconfigured permission as well as suspicious service account behavior. So overuse of credential or access from a new IP address and unexpected triggers or privilege escalation. Example is that port scanning or data exfiltration attempts. Okay, and Microsoft Azure, like in case of Azure Take, that would be some Azure Activity Log and Azure Resource Log and Azure Sentinel and Defender for Cloud. So Azure Activity Log, which records the management operation, and Azure Resource Log, which logs from individual services, example key vault as well as storage. And Azure Sentinel sign also that ingest logs and raises the alert. And a defender for cloud is that which monitors the configuration, okay, and recommends the remediation as well as detect the threat. And how these are managed is that uh, like both GCP and Azure allow customer alert rules based on some log events. Okay, so integration with sign tools like Splunk or Sentinel or Chronicle or automated remediation via logic apps or cloud functions can be able to uh, detect. And real-time dashboard is that to monitor the alert trends as well as the event. Okay, so this is all about the event as well as the alert. So in this particular video, we have discussed on the topics like uh, abuse of system privileges. So where we have discussed how does the privilege abuse work and what are the examples of privilege abuse and what are the potential risks of privilege abuse and how can you protect against the privilege abuse and what has it been and example cases of privilege abuse like we have seen about the scenario based and how to prevent these kind of thing and types of privilege abuse. Yes, and what are the risks and consequences are taking place in this particular thing, and we have discussed about the prevention as well as the mitigation. And in cloud, I mean in event and alert, we have discussed about what is meant by event or what is meant by alert and what are the importance of events and alert and best practices for managing events as well as alert and cloud specific use cases and S3 bucket misconfiguration. Okay, and root account usage and all those stuff we have seen. Okay, and in real time we have discussed about the Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud in event and alert. And apart from that, we have discussed regarding the like real-time incident which has happened in the malicious activity like in a Capital One or Codespace or Tesla. Okay, so these are some real world instances, and then apart from that, we have seen the cloud native security tools for the events as well as the alert configuration. I hope you had a clear idea on these kind of particular topic. Let us see in the next video. So thank you all.